So our second question, as you can see there, is about Joshua and the promised land. So we're going to turn to the book of Joshua, starting in chapter 1. It's on page 195 in your Pew Bible if you're following along in that way. And we're going to skip kind of through the whole book. It's sort of in three sections, it seems like, Joshua's book while you're turning. The first is Joshua's call to be the next leader after Moses. The second is the expansion of the Hebrew people, the Israelites, into the land of Canaan. And then the third is after they've settled, kind of reconciling how the law or how they're going to live together, creating some norms. So Joshua chapter 1, we'll start with verse 1. After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' minister, Moses, my servant, is dead, and now therefore arise, go over this Jordan, you and all this people, into the land which I am giving to them, to the people of Israel. Every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon I have given to you, as I promised to Moses. From the wilderness and this Lebanon, as far as the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites to the great sea, toward the going down of the sun, shall be your territory. No one shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not fail you or forsake you. Be strong and of good courage, for you shall cause this people to inherit the land which I swore to their fathers to give them. Only be strong and very courageous, being careful to do according to all the law which Moses my servant commanded you. Turn not from it to the right hand or to the left, that you may have good success wherever you go. This book of the law shall not depart out of your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night, that you may be careful to do according to all that is written in it. For then you shall make your way prosperous, and then you shall have good success. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and of good courage. Be not frightened, neither be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Then Joshua commanded the officers of the people, pass through the camp and command the people, prepare your provisions. For within 3 days you are to pass over this Jordan to go in to take possession of the land which the Lord your God gives you to possess. Now we're going to jump to chapter 6. We're going to read verse 1 through 16. Now Jericho, so at this point, right, they're making their way, and they get to the town of Jericho. Now Jericho was shut up from within and from without because of the people of Israel. None went out and none came in. And the Lord said to Joshua, see, I have given into your hand Jericho with its king and mighty men of valor. You shall march around the city, all the men of war going around the city once. Then shall you do for 6 days. And 7 priests shall bear 7 trumpets of ram's horn before the ark, and on the 7th day you shall march around the city 7 times, the priests blowing the trumpets. And when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, as soon as you hear the sound of the trumpet, then all the people shall shout with a great shout, and the wall of the city will fall down flat, and the people shall go up every man straight before him. So Joshua the son of Nun called the priests and said to them, take up the ark of the covenant, and let 7 priests bear 7 trumpets of ram's horn before the ark of the Lord. And he said to the people, go forward, march around the city, and let the armed men pass on before the ark of the Lord. And as Joshua had commanded the people, the 7 priests bearing the 7 trumpets of ram's horn before the Lord went forward, blowing their trumpets with the ark of the covenant of the Lord following them. And the armed men went before the priests who blew the trumpets. And the rear guard came up after the ark, while the trumpets blew continually. But Joshua commanded the people, you shall not shout or let your voice be heard, neither shall any word go out of your mouth until the day I bid you shout, and then you shall shout. So he caused the ark of the Lord to compass the city, going about it once. And they came into the camp and spent the night in the camp. Then Joshua rose early in the morning, and the priests took up the ark of the Lord, and the 7 priests bearing the 7 trumpets of the ram's horn before the ark of the Lord passed on, blowing the trumpets continually. And the armed men went before them, and the rear guard came after the ark of the Lord, while the trumpets blew continually. And the second day they marched around the city once and returned into the camp. So they did it 6 days. You follow what's happening, right? Is this familiar? See this story? Some of you, no? Right, so Joshua and his people, he sent the priests first. Some of them had trumpets, 7 of them had trumpets. They were to blow all the time. They were going to walk around the city once every day. On the 7th day, here we go. They rose early at the dawn of the day, and they marched around the city in the same manner 7 times. It was only on that day that they marched around the city 7 times. And at the 7th time, when the priests had blown the trumpets, Joshua said to the people, "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city." And then what happened? The wall seized down, right? That's the story of Jericho. Okay, we're going to jump now to chapter 11, verse 16. After the wall came down, they go chasing after kings and leaders and whatever to take over the land. These 5 kings fled and hid themselves in the cave at Makkedah. And it was told Joshua, "The 5 kings have been found hidden in the cave at Makkedah." And Joshua said, "Roll great stones against the mouth of the cave and set men by it to guard them. Do not stay there yourselves. Pursue your enemies. Fall upon..." Am I in the wrong chapter?
Yeah.
That's kind of creepy. You just, listen, the whole first half is creepy, everybody. But there you get a little taste of it. He essentially shut people up in a cave. Chapter 11, not chapter 10, chapter 11, verse 16. So Joshua took all that land, the hill country and all the Negev, and all the land of Goshen, and the lowland, and the Arabah, and the hill country of Israel, and its lowland from Mount Halak, that rises toward Seir, as far as Baal-gad in the valley of Lebanon, below Mount Hermon. And he took all their kings and smote them, and put them to death. Joshua made war a long time with all those kings. There was not a city that made peace with the people of Israel, except the Hivites, the inhabitants of Gibeon. They took all in battle. For it was the Lord's doing to harden their hearts, that they should come against Israel in battle, in order that they should be utterly destroyed, and should receive no mercy, but be exterminated, as the Lord commanded Moses. And Joshua came at that time, and wiped out the Anakim from the hill country, from Hebron, from Debir, from Anab, and from all the hill country of Judah, and from all the hill country of Israel. Joshua utterly destroyed them with their cities. There was none of the Anakim left in the land of the people of Israel. Only in Gaza, in Gath, and in Ashdod did some remain. So Joshua took the whole land, according to all that the Lord had spoken to Moses. And Joshua gave it for an inheritance to Israel, according to their tribal allotments. And the land had rest from war. Now would you turn with me to the book of Hebrews in the Christian Scriptures on page 1045. And this is a later account, someone trying to make sense of what just happened. Hebrews chapter 4. For God has somewhere spoken of the 7th day in this way. And God rested on the 7th day from all of God's works. And again, in this place, God said, "They shall never enter my rest. Since therefore it remains for some to enter it, and those who formerly received the good news failed to enter because of disobedience. Again he sets a certain day, today, saying through David so long afterward in the words already quoted, today, when you hear God's voice, do not harden your hearts. For if Joshua had given them rest, God would not speak later of another day. So then, there remains a Sabbath rest for the people of God. For whoever enters God's rest also ceases from his labors as God did from God's labors. Let us therefore strive to enter that rest, that no one fall by the same sort of disobedience. The word of the Lord. This land is yours, this land is mine, from California to the New York, from the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream water. This land was made for me. You know, there's like 17 verses to that song. The next one, right? I've roamed and rambled, I followed my footsteps. You guys know this? Sparkling sands of diamond deserts, and all around me a voice was sounding. This land was made for me. This is an odd verse. As I went walking, I saw a sign. You guys are so lost. And on that sign it said, "No trespassing." But on the other side, it didn't say nothing. That side was made for you and me. It's a weird verse, right? One more. This one I really don't think fits into the appropriate poetic verse, but in the shadow of the steeple I saw my people. By the relief office I see my people. As they stood there hungry, I stood there asking, is this land made for you and me? This land. This land was made for you and me, but before it was made for the Native Americans. Specifically here in New Jersey, right, it was made for the Lenapees, primarily. Was this land made for you and me? Land. Any izzard, right, who I consider the most hilarious cross-dressing comedian, does a shtick that goes something like this. We built empires. We stole countries. We stole countries with the cunning use of flags. Just sail around the world and stick a flag in. I claim India for Britain. You can't claim us. We live here. 500 million of us. Do you have a flag? We don't need a flag. It's our country. No flag, no country. Those are the rules. I've just made them up. Land acquisition. Manifest destiny. God promised Abraham a people in a land. Generations come and go. Abraham's clan grew to 12 tribes of Israel. They migrated from here to there and eventually landing in Egypt. Pharaohs come and go, and God's people find themselves enslaved until a young Hebrew boy is adopted by a Pharaoh's daughter, and his name was Moses. God used Moses to free the people from slavery. Moses led them out of Egypt, across the Red Sea, and into the wilderness. They roamed for 40 years, which is a literary device for a generation, or as long as it took. The generation that crossed the sea would never enter the promised land. The generation that remembered being enslaved, the generation that would really understand the feeling of freedom, never felt their own land beneath their feet. What would that land have meant to them? To that lost generation? What was it that God had promised? What were they running to? Because yes, at first they were running away from slavery, but what or where were they running to? What did the land mean? It's an important question because, like so many things in the scriptures, it doesn't just mean land, dirt, soil, plants, rocks. Land meant home. It meant rest. It meant trust. Trust that God made good on God's promises. It meant that they had finished a journey. It was a sense of completion. The best way to understand the scriptures is to allow scriptures to interpret itself, right? And that's why we read the Hebrews text. The Hebrews text does just that. The writer of the book of Hebrews reinterprets the act of settling in the promised land to mean coming into rest. Entering the promised land was likened to entering God's rest. And from the sound of it, the writer is asserting that the people who's actually reading those words are once again on a journey to enter the promised land or to enter God's rest. That's actually the definition of shalom at its best, a word that we often translate as peace, but it really means a sense of completion. God's intent was that we enter shalom, rest, peace, and completeness. But did Joshua have to kill all of the Canaanites in order to enter God's rest? Because it sure sounds like it. The story is pretty clear that it was God's instruction to Joshua. How do we understand or reconcile a God who would give such instruction? It sounds like a question more about the type of God we believe in, and less about the type of military action of Joshua. Joshua's military action reveals the type of God Joshua trusted. The really, really hard work for us is to grow with the scriptures. There are plenty of things in the scriptures that simply, when we read them, we shake our head at them. That doesn't mean we're not taking the Bible seriously. I think on the contrary. It means that we're taking it very seriously. It means that we're taking the Bible as passed down to us by our ancestors of faith. It means that we take the ancestors seriously, and it provides us with an authoritative witness to how they understood and believed in God. Their belief, their time, their way, their lens. They didn't have the whole picture of God any more than we have the whole picture of God. The Bible is not God. I'll say that again, because there are plenty of voices in Christianity that sure sound like it. The Bible is not God. And I'm getting a little bit into next week's sermon that has to do with obeying parts of the law and not all of it. What do we do when the Bible asserts something that we cannot understand or reconcile, like massive land acquisition and genocide? I hope, for starters, we never understand it. I hope we never reconcile one people wiping out another, whether it be the Canaanites, the Native Americans, the Jewish people in the Holocaust, or the Sudanese. I hope we never reconcile something like that. The story that we have in the scriptures is one side of the story. It's not the whole story. Howard Zinn, right, the author of The People's History of the United States, gave a lecture once, and sort of at the end of his lecture, he offered what seemed like afterthoughts or even unedited remarks, you know, and sometimes that happens. He asks, what about the point of view of the Native Americans? What would their point of view be about Columbus? What would they think of Columbus as a person who kidnapped them, who enslaved them, who mutilated them, who killed them, who was driven by greed, by profit, by the need to send something back to his financiers back in Europe? On how a whole Indian population was wiped out on that island, what would they say of Columbus? If you begin to look at American history from a Native American point of view, lots of things look different. He continues, at whose expense? How many people did we kill? How many tribes were massacred? How many civilizations were destroyed by that great triumphant expansion? He ends with, if we don't want to repeat these horrors, then it seems to me that it's absolutely necessary to look at history from different points of view. If we want to understand or reconcile parts of the Bible that don't sit right with us, then we need to look around the story as much as within the story and beyond the story. We need to consider different points of view of the story. We need to consider the Canaanites. We need to see our ancestors for who they were, for what they believed, for their hopes and dreams and their motivation. And in this story in particular, we need to take a second look or a third look at what the promised land was. Not the dirt and the rock and the soil and the plants, but the meaning of the land. Entering the promised land was the last leg, often the hardest leg, the most difficult, the most strenuous leg of any journey. Their journey toward freedom in relationship to God. When they entered the promised land, they had completed their journey. They had arrived in God's space for them. That's great for them. Have we? Have we entered God's space for us? Are we done with our journey, or are we still on our journey? And as we walk on our own journey toward freedom and relationship with God, have we learned from our ancestors, or are we repeating some of the same mistakes? Are we making the same mistakes? Are we trusting the same kind of God that they did? Or have we evolved in our understanding of God? And here's an even harder question perhaps. Are we headed in the right direction? God's intent was and is that we enter shalom, rest and peace and completeness. Are we there yet?